well-being of LGBTQI+ youth and other Americans. I encourage all of you to think of yourselves as ambassadors to your communities. These conversations don't have to be limited or restricted to a medical setting, but for school teachers, principals, boards.
Lord only knows how many pediatricians vehemently disagree with these obscene plans to steal our children's innocence. I bet the majority see the butchering of confused children as evil, pure and simple, but are afraid to speak out. But not Julie, who's a fellow at the American Academy of Pediatrics.
They have no idea how you identify which kids are trans and require this treatment. So they were sort of like, we're just technicians and we'll just tell you, like, if you have a trans kid, we'll tell you how to do the transition. And then the American Academy of Pediatrics the next year just leapt into that void and said, oh, we'll tell you how you know which kids. You ask them. And if they say they're trans, then they're trans.
There needs to be a massive class action lawsuit against the AAP. All right, the director of Boston General's Gender Clinic unwittingly reveals their dirty little secret about these strong drugs, downplayed as puberty blockers.
I worry that they're being given out a lot like candy, which is great in some ways, but it's also like, okay, well, you need to have the conversation.
She says great in some ways. It's not like there are life-changing ramifications involved with these drugs or anything, no. I mean, once you encourage transitioning at any age, there is that you can ever reverse the mental or the physical damage done to yourself.
It's been the most difficult thing I've ever gone through in my life. In addition to the health side effects I experienced, the way it affected my career as a singer has been the hardest thing to deal with. My singing and speaking voice will never be the same after my time on testosterone.
But these drugs are great for kids. At least that's what another AAP executive committee member says.
Puberty blockers can be puberty. Parents may or may not be accepting. This may be a surprise to the parent. It just slows things down. They're very safe and effective. And then the next option is gender-affirming hormone therapy.
There's big money here. Children are their target market, and the poor kids are falling into the trap.
How did you feel when I first told you I was a girl?
Sixth grade is just such a hard year anyway for everyone, and especially when you're trans.
Back when I was in 8th grade, over winter break, that's when I first was exposed to, I guess, the word transgender, and I just, like, as I was reading about it, I just felt like that was me.
This is an aggressive marketing push coast to coast. Except in states like where courageous governors like Ron DeSantis are successfully fighting this attack of innocence. The march of the gender radicals will continue. Left in its wake, though, of course, are children's innocence, grooming them for the new battles ahead. The fact that professional organizations such as the AMA and the American Association of Pediatrics have been subverted by the political and sexual ideology here is terrible for the already bruised and battered reputation of the public health sector. Although the Pediatrics Association claims to be working for the health benefits of all children, 4 out of its 6 members on its LGBT Health and Wellness Committee endorse puberty blockers for patients as young as 10 and cross-sex hormones to patients as young as 14. This is absolutely appalling, and it's frankly satanic. If you want to know AAP's horrors, I recommend you read Aaron's Barium's entire piece at the Free Beacon. The struggle to preserve our children's natural sense of innocence and wonderment will continue. And we must never, ever allow ourselves to be intimidated by all those people with titles and their advanced degrees or government positions. After all, look at what they did with COVID. The lies, the cover-ups, the character assassination of brilliant doctors, and the same dynamics are at play here. But now, we're onto their game. And that's the angle. Joining me now is Dr. Marty Makary, professor at Johns Hopkins School of Medicine and Fox News contributor. Dr. Makary, it seems to me that the American Academy of Pediatrics is perpetrating a dangerous fraud on children. And it has ramifications that are so serious, not just for their innocence, but for their mental and physical well-being as well.
Well, a lot of pediatricians are upset about the AAP leadership. Just to give you a little sample, 40% of pediatricians in rural areas don't even recommend the COVID vaccination for children, yet the AAP makes it sound like that's misinformation. You know, glorifying suicide and its contagious effect of glorifying it publicly is a well-known phenomenon. And if you actually go to the AAP website, it says on there that suicide should not be glorified, and yet that's exactly what was done. And the one point I want to make, Laura, is that there is nothing more barbaric of a society than the genital mutilation of its children for no medical indication. And when they say that hormonal therapy, which is the manipulation of the hormonal axes that affect multiple organ systems, is safe and effective, no. We know that vitamin therapy has long-term consequences. How can altering the entire hormonal axis have no long-term consequences?
Now, this Dr. Julie Mason, I mentioned her in the angle, Dr. McCary, she seems to be one of the few senior members of the AAP speaking out. And she spoke about this is just coincidental sharp rise in the number of people declaring trans patients. Watch.
Prior to 2018, I had maybe one trans patient. Like, this is a thing that occurred in 2 out of 10,000 children. 1 in 20 years, yeah. And then they started to come every few months and then more often.
Well, in the UK, Dr. McCary, gender dysphoria in children, they report, has increased. Suggestive selling at McDonald's, but this is suggestive selling of transgenderism, which is takes it up quite a few notches, don't you think?
Well, it's encouraged in some schools, certain circles in the United States. How do you have a school system where 40% of the young children claim that they don't identify as a male or female? Somebody has taught them that that is something that they can turn to. And let's be honest, if we had good studies, there is a hypothesis that people turn to this as children in order to rebel. There may be a pattern of a lack of love in their background. That may explain the high suicide and depression rate in people who claim to identify in this way. We need good research, and the American Academy of Pediatrics has chosen not to fund good research and instead to rule by opinion. And if you listen to some of their members, like Dr. Mason, who I like, they actually put forth a resolution saying, if we're going to make any recommendations on trans medicine, let's have it be based on data. And the AAP hostily took that recommendation resolution down.
Well, didn't Dr. Paul McHugh at Johns Hopkins, isn't he the guy who did all the groundbreaking research on gender dysphoria and transgenderism? Wasn't that the biggest body of research we had? And he certainly was not on board, it didn't seem like, with any of this stuff.
A lot of doctors are not, and cancel culture has moved into medicine now. We don't have the open forum of scientific opinions that we need
Disturbing.
Right now, and that's very concerning.
Weaponized medicine. Politically weaponized medicine. Unbelievable. Dr. McCary, thank you for speaking out. Thank you.
Republicans had a very, very strong election, with the RNC's record this cycle of turning out more than 4 million more Republicans, of winning statewide in almost every battleground state, proves that the turnout worked. From an RNC standpoint, we flipped the House and our ground game worked.
Now, as we said last night, I said at the top of the show, the angle likes Ronna McDaniel a lot. She's a wonderful person. But the results do speak for themselves. She's right about the House flipping. But it's time for change at the RNC. Her tenure needs to come to an end. Every incumbent in the Senate, running for Senate, stayed in the Senate. There was no Republican flips of any of the seats held by incumbent Democrats. What is that all about? What about early voting? So as the party transitions into this new generation, I hope, of elected leadership, this has to be the same at the RNC. Now, earlier today, Congressman Lee Zeldin said he would not be running, noting that McDaniel's reelection pre-baked by design. But he also said that doesn't mean she should be running again. Now, if the RNC wants to completely they ignore the grassroots of the party with the status quo. But I think they're going to be really unhappy when they send out all those fundraising letters and they get, a big nothing in return. It's time to look for new leadership that will revitalize the RNC and help the party move to victory after victory in 2024. And that would mean supporting our next guest. Joining me now, Harmeet Dillon, RNC committeewoman from California, candidate for RNC chair. And full disclosure, Harmeet, I've known you for about 25 years. We both went to the same college, Dartmouth, and on to UVA Law School. You're a few years younger than I am, lucky girl. But I've known you, and I can say with, full candor to everybody, as I always try to be candid, you are a consummate professional, and you don't take any crap from anyone, and you do it with a smile. But, is it pre-baked that Ronna McDaniel stays on as RNC chair?
Well, thank you for having me, Laura, and for your kind words. I can understand why Lee Zeldin feels that way. He probably ran into a brick wall of members who have been made a lot of promises by our current chair. And, also members prefer another member to be the chair of the RNC. And so those two factors do make it daunting. And, I'm making calls to members. I'm hearing a lot of disgruntled members who really want to see change, but they're also afraid. Because there's been a culture at the RNC that if you don't play ball with the chair and the frankly corrupt consultant-driven machine inside the Beltway, you'll be punished. You may not get plum committee assignments. Your state may not get transfers to their building fund. You may not get help with your congressional races, and on and on and on. And this culture of retribution and sort of transactional relationships is not what the RNC is supposed to be about. It's supposed to be about electing Republicans all over the country, and I've actually been kind of appalled by some of the things I've heard over the last 2 weeks as I've begun making phone calls to members. And so I pledge to turn that around, Laura. We can get 501c3s and nonprofits, fake nonprofits that do the work of the Democrats, and we are not innovating, we are not leading, our messaging is not clear and concise, and we are not motivating the base.
Yeah. Well, by the way, Harmeet, MSNBC, we don't have to play the soundbite, but suffice it to say, the fact that they're so worried about you, that tells me everything I need to know, namely that you're the right person for the job. They're like, well, she could be problematic. Harmeet, we're going to be covering this. I want to be fair to both Ronna and you, but again, no offense, but it's time to change it up. Harmeet, now the shocking material made available to the children of service members in Defense Department schools, plus Senator Tom Cotton's message to corporate America spitting in the face of conservatives went viral. The video and the senator next.
Heart valve disease is more common than you or your doctor may think, especially as you get older. It's serious but treatable with the proper diagnosis. If you or a loved one are experiencing shortness of breath, fatigue, tightness or pressure, dizziness or fainting, talk to your doctor and ask for an echocardiogram to get diagnosed early. Best quality of life. Learn more at askforecho.com. That's ask.com.
At T-Mobile, we believe people deserve more without paying more, so we keep adding more great benefits. Plus, with our price, the price of your rate plan for talk, text, or data.
It's like expecting a Christmas caroler.
Switch now and take advantage of our price lock guarantee. Get used to getting even more from T.
Price lock for rate plan price of current low network service for eligible lines excludes taxes, fees, promos, and third-party services.
It's time to recognize you sausage-loving genius. For without you, how would we know that Eckrich smoked sausage can be eaten thrice in one day, and that you can take your lunch break before noon? Here's to you, Eckrich smoked sausage. You do you.
Our fire seasons have been rough, and now there's another threat. The charred soil means an increased risk of flooding. With flood insurance, you'll have a chance to build back stronger. Be ready for what comes next. Visit floodsmart.gov/wildfires.
Groupon presents The Holiday
unicorn. You can't see me, but I'm a unicorn. You know, one horn. I know magic, and judging by the best holiday gifts of 2022 guide you've been perusing, you, not so much. Luckily, Groupon has deals on all sorts of magical gifts, like helicopter rides and spa days, so you can quit buying soap and use code MAGIC20 for 20% off local experiences. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to get my horn waxed.
Bring the holiday magic back to gifting. Shop Groupon experiences. Limit 1 per customer. Max discount $50 on scope for 122. Exclusions apply. See details on eligible deal pages.
Come strengthen your pack at the new Great Wolf Lodge in Manteca. With over 50 attractions, we wanted to see the remaining seconds of this ad.
River Canyon Run, Oliver's Moonstone Maze, 10-Paw Bowling, Howler's Peak Ropes Course, Magi Quest, Slaptail Pond Wave Pool, Build-A-Bear Workshop, Storytime, a 4-story water fort.
40 go. And now that a getaway to Great Wolf Lodge in Manteca is just a short ride away, families have time to experience every attraction at the lodge. Great Wolf Lodge. Strengthen the pack.
With one of the best savings rates in America, banking with Capital One is the easiest decision in the history of decisions. Even easier than choosing Slash to be in your band.
Next up for lead guitar. You're in.
Cool. Yep, even easier than. And with no fees or minimums on checking and savings accounts, is it even a decision? That's banking reimagined. What's in your wallet? Terms apply. See.com/bank for details. Capital One and a member FDIC.
All right, it is long past time for Republicans to start auditing how all Pentagon dollars are spent, not just those sent without any oversight to Ukraine, tens of billions of dollars. We got our hands on shocking materials being offered within the Department of Defense education activity schools around the bases and so forth. It's a system educating 66,000 kindergartners through 12th graders connected to the military families. A book titled Beyond Magenta details oral sex performed by an 8-year-old. That's available to middle schoolers. And then there's Middle School as a Drag. You Better Work, WERK. Another book available to middle schoolers. It tells the story of a 12-year-old boy who starts a business for the management of child drag queen shows. And also available to high schoolers is a book titled This Book is Gay, which provides instructions on how to find and participate in orgies at saunas or bathhouses. Joining me now is the House Armed Services Committee member who obtained these materials, decorated combat vet Mark Green. Congressman, you plan on sending a letter tomorrow. This is, I mean, Republicans just wanting to write a blank check to this Pentagon, like we're still in the Greatest Generation here, with with World War II movies playing in the background. This is not the military of yesterday.
No. There's been a huge increase, Laura, in just 2 years of this pornographic material in the libraries and in the curriculum of our Dodd school system, detailing how to actually commit sexual assault. Now, these are the men and women who are trained to protect us. There are, and we're teaching their children how to hurt other people. I mean, it's absurd, it's insane, it's tragic.
Well, what can Republicans, now that you guys are going to take control of the House, we had Mitch McConnell, looks like maybe they're backing up, trying to push an omnibus, which would fund the military for the next 10 months. Then you have the additional appropriations for the National Authorization Defense Fund. Well, what can you do to stop this crap, from being funded?
In my preference is a CR, a short CR that puts us in charge.
Continuing resolution, which gives you guys leverage.
That's exactly right. So we can start with a new budget, get that done, but we have to put in the National Defense Authorization Act that the Dodd schools can't do this.
DOD school, make it
right, the DOD schools, and we can actually tell them to stop doing that, just like we're telling them now to end the vaccine mandate. So that's in this NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act, and so we write it into the law.
Now, as Democrats on the Hill are signaling they're willing to make concessions on the vax mandate, kabuki theory to me, in the NDAA, the White House is digging in. So watch this.
Republicans in Congress have decided that they'd rather fight against the health and well-being of our troops than protecting them. And we believe that it is a mistake. Making sure our troops are prepared and ready for service is a priority for President Biden. The vaccination requirement for COVID does just that.
She really just needs to hand out the briefing book to all the people in the room and just dispense with the briefing. So what about that? I mean,